Hello everyone, my name is Anastasia Konamo and this is my presentation regarding immersion and video games. But before we dive in, let's take a look at the contents. First of all, we will be discussing the definition of immersion and the benefits of immersion. We will also be talking about immersion and video games, which is the main theme of the presentation. We will also be talking about the different types of immersion as well as the different video game features that can be used in education before wrapping up with something called immersion tendency. But first of all, what exactly is immersion? Well, you see, the researchers and current studies do not always agree on what exactly is immersion and the characteristics that can fall under the term immersion. It has been characterized as an excessively vague but all inclusive concept. And even though there might not be one very concrete example that all encompasses immersion, there have been several words associated with it, such as realism, naturalness, presence, basically the sense of being surrounded by different reality, feeling like you have left the real world and are completely submerged into something else. It is mostly a psychological term. We mostly use it as a metaphorical term when we talk about immersion in video games or in domains such as education. Of course, it can be literal as well, but it is mostly associated with the feel of being so absorbed into something that our perceptual system stops being attuned to the real world. Of course, that is not just associated with technology. Books have been around for much longer and they can still deliver powerful immersive experiences. Let's take a look at a few definitions. As far as the dictionary goes, we have the traditional definition, which, as I mentioned before, is a technical term of immersion, the act of putting somebody or something into a liquid, of being completely immersed, for example, into the ocean, being underwater. And the most recent term that has to do with the state of being completely involved in something to the point where you completely forget about the real world and you become absorbed. Again, though, not quite as simple. There are different concepts even when it comes to that. We have, for example, psychological immersion, which is our psychological state when we are in this immersive state, when we are so involved and engaged that we forget about the real world. It has to do with our mental perception and our mental absorption in the different world that we are experiencing. And we also have what we call perceptual immersion. It is basically, in other words, experiencing multisensory stimulation. It is the extent of submersion of our senses into this world. How many of our senses are immersed into an environment and have lost track of reality and are no longer taking stimuli from the real world, but only from the virtual world into which we are immersed? But let's move on to discuss some of the benefits of immersion. First of all, it has been known to increase engagement, and this is a term associated with other important terms such as enjoyment, motivation, and flow. Flow is actually considered the optimal experience, the extreme case of immersion, which is what most of those who make immersive experience seek out. Engagement, in on the other hand, is the first level of immersion. It is when you slowly start to invest in your time and your energy and your attention into something. Since we're talking about video games, allow me to put it in that context. It is basically when you start getting engaged into a video game and start finding the things that you enjoy most about it. And as soon as you move past the first stage of engagement, we come to the second benefit, which has to do with cognitive and emotional involvement. Basically, you are slowly becoming more interested, and the more interested you are, the more absorbed you are, the more invested you are, the more likely you are to be long term involved with a video game, since we're talking about video games, of course. Immersion also tends to increase curiosity and retention because the senses of surprise and novelty do tend to keep users motivated and interested. In the context of video games, you will be surprised how many things you can learn by playing a video game and being immersed in it. Suddenly, all the little tidbits of the world are inside your head and you don't even remember where you learned them. It all just happened naturally, which is what immersion is all about. Finally, we also have individuality and a sense of control. Basically, by being able to control your environment and feel like you're contributing to this world and that your decisions matter, you are more likely to want to return to this world and continue to explore because you feel like you have an impact. To move forward and discuss video games and immersion a little bit more, let's start by saying that video games are generally considered an interactive narrative medium. It has actually been said that the power to immerse the players is one of the attributes that has to do with creating the greatest video games of all times. Of course, not every game can be immersive, or well, not every game can be successfully emerging immersive. And it also has to do a lot with the type of video game and the world of the video game, how interactive it is as a whole, and most importantly, with player perception. For instance, why are you so immersed into a video game? Does it have to do with a sense of achievement? Do you feel like you're accomplished in that world? Does it have to do with you feeling like you're socializing with others? Is it because you feel the need to escape, to be part of a group? Are you so caught up in the competition? Are you interested in the game itself, its mechanics, and its narrative? That is actually what brings me to my next slide, which has to do with the different immersion types. First of all, we have what we call systems immersion. It is basically associated with the state of being engaged with the mechanics of the game, the little tidbits, the challenges, the rules. For example, when playing Pac-Man, you are not likely to see yourself as a dot eating ghosts, but the rules of the game and the sense that you're working towards an achievement keeps you hooked. There is also spatial immersion, which has to do with being transported into the virtual world. It is associated with the concept of embodiment. We also have, as I mentioned before, empathetic or social immersion. It is the connections that might develop with different characters. AI or human doesn't have to be one or the other. It is the social context. It is the sense of seeing your favorite character and empathizing with them and following them along into their journeys because you feel a sense of kinship with them. And finally, we have the narrative or sequential immersion, which is generally associated with the game's narrative, with the events, the challenges, the quests, the exploration, the sense that there is a constant evolution of the game and what you can take from it. But let's leave behind video games as they are and talk about an important question. Can video games' immersive features benefit education? Well, I will come to say that yes, they can. And in fact, to an extent, they already have. For example, some of the video game features that can and already have benefited education have to do with, for example, interactive simulations. They have already been associated with a higher level of interactivity that in turn equals a greater sense of appeal. Students become so engrossed into the different environment and they feel that they can interact and affect it so much so that they feel the need to experiment, to observe, to learn, and they forget that they are actually here to learn. There's also an important concept known as gamification that is associated with video games, and it has to do with adding small game-like elements into your regular educational approach. For example, badges, different levels, leaderboards, giving your students the sense that they can complete tasks in order to learn. Another popular feature also has to do with role-playing, exercises. They can help students understand different viewpoints, and they actually can be pretty investing because students can step away from who they are and start understanding and feeling like somebody else. Again, another important feature that has also been discussed is storytelling and narrative. You can incorporate storytelling elements into your educational content that might make it more relatable, more engaging. It can help students connect with the material and actually learn it better. I already briefly touched upon the next one, the reward system, that it helps students actually feel like they are accomplishing and they're progressive steadily towards taking control of their own education. It can help students feel more motivating, feel like they are constantly on the search for knowledge, and in the long run, that can help them maintain what they have learned better. This is also linked with exploration, which I also briefly touched upon. It is the sense of discovery, allowing students to discover the content at their own pace, take control of their decisions, of their time, of their education, of course, with our guidance, but giving them the sense that they are independent in their learning and they can slowly and steadily learn what actually works better for them and learn their strengths and their weaknesses can actually prove to be extremely beneficial for them in the long run. Finally, before I wrap up this presentation, I would like to discuss an important term that can impact someone's association with immersion, not only when it comes to video games, but also when it comes to education. This is titled immersive tendency. Basically, what that means is that some individuals have a greater, let's say, ability to become immersed than others. And it has been linked both with our individual predisposition towards immersion and with how potent an environment might be. For example, if an environment is not well structured and is not inclusive or accessible, it might keep people from being completely immersed. Of course, that also has to do, as I mentioned, with our individual predisposition. Maybe we're just not feeling comfortable immersing in a specific environment, or maybe we just don't know how to let go and become immersed. Basically, it has been associated with a reduction in the benefits of immersion because if somebody cannot get fully immersed, they cannot receive all the benefits. However, that is still only poorly understood, and we're not exactly sure how much immersive tendency can affect our ability to become immersed, and thus whether it can be seen as something that should be documented and examined in the future because it reduces the benefits of immersion, or if it's just something that might have to do with the spur of the moment. Overall, we have seen immersion as a beneficial factor, whether it has to do with video games or education. It is undeniable that it has many benefits. We also saw that there are different types of immersion that have to do both with the person themselves and the environment they are immersed in. We have also touched upon the potential importance of the term immersive tendency, and it has been proven, according to my presentation, that there are video game features that are applicable in education. Some of them have already been applied, some of them are only exist as ideas and might become applicable in the future. Who knows? But that will be all from me. This is the slide that contains my references. If you would like to check any of them out, I do recommend them because they were great articles. And that will be all from me. Thank you.